It's about time we start our discussion tonight right here on Checkpoint, and it has everything to do with corruption. I'm sure some of you might say this is the tired topic, but we're not going to stop talking about this issue as long as we continue losing billions of shillings from public coffers. To be specific, 600 billion shillings goes missing from our budget every single year. And the latest coming from the Public Service Commission is that they have named Talib Mbarak, a former military intelligence officer who has been named as the new EACC CEO. He's going to take up that position once he's going to be vetted and approved by Parliament. In studio, I have two gentlemen, Irungo Houghton, who's the Executive Director, Amnesty International, as well as Professor Peter Kagwanja, who's a scholar on international relations and political science. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
These are two individuals who have a lot of experience as far as governance in this country is concerned. Irungo, let me begin with you. Once again, this is a topic many might say is a tired topic, but it continues to affect every single Kenyan in all spheres. If you look at agriculture, security, I mean, corruption is still there. So before we talk about this individual, that is Talib Mbarak, there's some sort of a deep perception out there with regards to EACC, as far as as much as we've seen new impetus, that is in DCI and DPP, not many people have kind words with regards to EACC. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, first of all, I think even if Kenyans are tired about this topic, the first thing they have to recognize is that corruption is at the center of all that is wrong with this country. Whether you look at the agriculture industry, whether you look at health, whether you look at general governance issues, you cannot progress unless we are able to win the war against corruption. It is systemic, it is deep, and it is institutionalized in many of our public offices. So coming to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, I think one of the concerns has been really we've seen a lot of energy and vigor in the Director of Public Prosecutions and also in the Directorate of Criminal Intelligence. Many of the cases that are currently before our courts, the big cases, whether it be the ministry or the NYS2 scandal or the Cereals Board or the different parastatals, many of these are being prosecuted and led by these two institutions and not the leading institution on corruption matters. And I think this is what has necessitated some questions about the capacity of the EACC.
Prof, let me be the devil's advocate here. The people who believe, or at least the communication we normally get from EACC is that they don't have, enough staff, they're not well equipped, they're not getting enough support from the government. Do you think that should be a reason as to why they're not, taking center role when it comes to the war on graft?
No, I think the problem is the way as Kenyans have conceptualized the issue of corruption. We think that corruption is an ethical, is a moral issue, and therefore don't pursue it the way it is pursued. And strangely, it is only this country that does that. In South Africa, you'll have Scorpion. Scorpion is an independent body that investigates and prosecutes. And the whole establishment has all kind of people in terms of expertise. And in that regard, if you have a mandate that's spread so widely that you have clerics and other people, moral issues and all, you miss the point. Corruption is a crime. It's like murder. It's like theft, robbery with violence. Because you're talking about billions of shillings, which are enough to feed this country and even to buy medicine for this country. And we still think that stealing is a moral issue. So we are holding the wrong end of the stick. And therefore, the change that we need in EACC is not about personnel, because it's personnel for what? You have to clarify the problem first. Corruption is a crime. You don't want people who are walking the streets and doing their own things, and you know for sure, and every Kenyan should know for sure that they have a case to answer. So if they have a case to answer, they need to answer it. So ICC should work with the relevant bodies to prosecute cases. It is not to begin negotiating what degree of morality or immorality is involved in stealing 600 billion or 600 million Kenya shillings. I think as Kenyans, we need to clarify what we are dealing with here. If we still continue thinking that you need to have Archbishop so-and-so, cleric so-and-so, so-and-so in morality and so on, to deal with the corruption, we are holding the wrong end of the stick.
So you're saying the issue of lack of support perhaps is just an excuse?
Yeah, because you're giving people opportunities to do the catwalk. because they will come in and say, I'm not guilty. It's not so guilty. You have a platform where you begin now to do the strategic propaganda, the strategic communication about crimes. That's why you need men and women who know the law, who are trained to deal with the law, because corruption is a crime. For most of us, when IECC was formed, we raised our voice that we are making an architecture of anti-corruption that is too heavy, top-heavy, and that is going to be ineffective. In fact, IECC has been used by a number of people to exonerate themselves. It's a kind of a cleaning, you know.
What do they call it? They call it the revolving door of
It's a revolving door.
Actually, they have a revolving door at Integrity Center.
Yes, it's a revolving door, symbolic of the revolving door at the Integrity Center. But I'm assuming that the changes that are taking place now is to synchronize IECC with that mandate of holding to account those who have stolen, not as people who have a moral case to argue, but those who have a crime to answer for.
Yes, another question, of course, which has been raised time and again is how EACC has been working with these other bodies like the DCI and the DPP. We're going to talk about that later. But issue of support, once again, do you think that is an excuse from the EACC?
One of the things that Halake Wako will be happy about when he steps down is that he managed to get the financing and the staff personnel that he required, and that was an issue for many years. And I think 2 years ago, I think we saw the capacity of the EACC expanded dramatically with a number of prosecutors. I think there is an issue about the type of skills that are required, because I think sometimes we rely too much on lawyers and investigators, but not necessarily public finance management experts. Because many of these crimes are complex and they are related to the Public Finance Management Act. And if you do not know the act well enough, then you end up charging people. I mean, I think we've had at least 2 cases. The NYS cases are good examples. We have 14 to 15 people charged, and then we end up actually proceeding with just 1 or 2 cases. And the others become state witnesses. Now, my concern is that it suggests to me that actually we don't know quite, we don't do enough homework so that when we're actually prosecuting, we know what we're prosecuting people specifically on, rather than take people through a process, then after a year, you're releasing them or they become state witnesses.
It's interesting, some of the suspects are even daring these bodies to come up with any evidence whatsoever against them. Yes, Prof.
That's the same. I'm just simply corroborating what Irungo is saying, that part of the capacity that we need in EACC is the capacity to do investigative research. Before you even mention somebody's name, that the file is complete. Because anti-corruption can be a witch hunt. And if you don't have your data, take for example, and this is very close to me, in my own vicinity, Parliament comes up, shouts that there is 1.7 billion stolen, and they had not looked at their facts. And they even mentioned somebody's name and put it in their report. And they have not investigated. And I was asking one of my senior colleagues in government, now, what are we doing about Parliament's capacity to do research? EACC's capacity to do research, investigation, because corruption, being identified with corruption is very, very bad. Because by the time you clean up your name, people will already have identified you with it. So IECC is supposed to be that body that by the time you pronounce that Houghton Irongo is involved in this, you are 90% sure that the facts tell you that's where he is. So you don't begin to now move backward
arrest and
then research, and you already pulled somebody, dragged somebody through the mud. So if we're serious on corruption, the capacity of EACC is vital, but as Irungo says, it must be the capacity that enables you to do, this is a financial crime. This is a crime of this nature, and these are the facts.
And Irungo, it's very interesting because all these issues that you've identified here, I'm sure policymakers are also well aware of this. But the question is, why are we not seeing enough action being taken, for example?
So I think we are seeing action. We are seeing a number of prosecutions, and there are several going through our courts at the moment. So on the side of arrests and prosecutions, that is definitely happening now. And I think all Kenyans of goodwill should really welcome this and should support the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Director of Criminal Intelligence investigation to basically proceed to take these cases through the court system accordance with our law. I think the concern that people have, and it is a justified concern, is that we do not see convictions. We do not see enough convictions. And I think that's where the fatigue is beginning to sit in. But I would encourage people, anybody who's watching this, who's feeling that that we are losing the battle, that the battle is in vain, that it is not going to produce the kind of country that they would be proud of to leave to their children, that the moment that we become cynical, resigned, and hopeless is the moment that the corrupt people win. So keeping a sense of hope, keeping challenging our law enforcement agencies to proceed and to proceed with care, but also proceed with haste and follow the law, I think helps the fight against corruption. I think the other thing I would like to say, this morning we released a report of the state of human rights in Kenya, and one of the interesting findings is that Kenyans are in many ways feeling more comfortable that the human rights realization has improved since 1948, when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted, and even since 2010 when we passed our constitution. But over half of the country feel that there is no equality of the law, that if you do not have a degree of wealth or influence, you are not going to get your fair hearing in courts. And I think this is a direct relationship to the amount of corruption that we're seeing in the country, that people feel that once they have grabbed our taxes, that they are able to buy their way through the processes prior to the court, during the court, and even after the court system.
Interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people are also talking about the politicization of the one graft. Now, Prof, I'd like to pick your brain on this with regards to this new individual that we've already named, that is Twali Mubarak. Of course, he's going to take up this position once he's vetted and approved by Parliament. What should Kenyans know about this individual? And do you think he's going to give in some sort of a new impetus to EACC? Because we've already seen new individuals at DCI and DPP. They're doing well, at least. So do you think he has all it takes?
I don't want to look like I'm blowing the trumpet for Twalib and whoever he is and watching. We've not met. But I know his CV from the time he was in the military, the chief of military intelligence. He has worked with IECC, so he's not new to the place he's being appointed to. From 2010, he was already there. This is a gentleman who has worked in very many areas, and it is a skill. It was actually the missing cog, the missing link in Kenya's anti-corruption architecture. That's what we were missing.
Yes.
And he's coming in, and I can say that with certainty, is going to make a whole age of difference. Because by the nature of his training, he look at the evidence, he look at the trails, he's going to track down all the areas of corruption. So we are not going to get what Irungo is saying, that you have 14 people indicted and only people, one or two brought to court. You are not going to see this again. Two, he's going to give teeth to EACC. Why? Because from his experience and his training, he'll link very well with the DPP, he'll link very well with the DCI, and he's also going to link up with other branches of government that are into the investigation. In other words, we are beginning now to recognize corruption as a crime, and not just a crime, but a heinous crime that is undermining our growth. We do know, Irugu is talking about human rights, and I think we need to celebrate the 70 years of human rights. And Kenya, we have made giant strides towards that direction. What is pulling us back is corruption.
Exactly.
And 3 or 4 weeks ago, I wrote about our capitalism. We've committed ourselves to capitalism, but our capitalism has no soul. By 25, you are a billionaire, and by the 26th birthday, you are slaughtered. How useful is that? You cannot live to see your great-grandchildren and for your great-grandchildren to enjoy your wealth. What are you working for? Because we are on a breakneck speed to steal and become rich and become prosperous and become famous because we have money, but at the same time, we have made enemies who anytime want to see us gone. In other words, even though we are saying it's still a crime, we have this other aspect of teaching Kenyans to respect other people, respect other people's rights. And respecting other people's rights, also means basically respecting the labor of others. We pay taxes. Why do you want to steal our taxes? We labor every day. Why can't you labor like everybody else? You want to sit in a hotel doing deals instead of going to your office to do transaction and production and creating wealth for our people.
Yes.
So in short, I think the coming in of Twarib Barak, if we don't get it this time, we'll never get it. And his coming also shows the commitment of the president and the government, the current government, to deal with corruption. And we are saying again and again, President Kenyatta's real legacy are not houses, is not these industries, they are not these jobs. His legacy are twofold. One is a country of integrity that has no corruption, and it's a country that is united, that doesn't think of itself as tribes. Because corruption is also being perpetrated by the fact that if Yusuf steal, and I'm from his clan in Wajir, then I have the obligation to defend him.
If he's a thief,
he's a thief. He's a thief. Thieves have no tribes. Thieves have no color. Thieves have no religion. Thieves are thieves. And corrupt people are thieves.
Yes, very important insight. And I'm sure Irong will want to make a comment about the new individual, the incoming CEO, but we're going to do that after this very short break. And of course, this is a checkpoint right here on KTN. It's exactly 46 minutes past the hour. We're going to talk more about corruption in this country and something else that we've already talked about, that is the multi-agency task force and why EACC seems to have been missing in action. All this after this very short break. Stay with us.